has ever happened to the Productivity Council? And what is its role?
I mean, I can't comment too much on that because I haven't been involved in.
Well, I know Michael Anisette is up next, so we can probably ask him. I think he can tell us a little bit of what's happening with that. But Ian, the Minister of Finance obviously is facing a daunting challenge. The expenditure profile continues to remain a concern. Many are saying that while they are seeing the initiatives to stimulate, government is not doing enough to assure the population, to assuage the fears of those that we are not going to continue running a deficit budget and end up running the risk of being another Eurozone or a Euro crisis.
Okay, we've been told that we would be in budget and deficit for the next 5 years. Right? That is the timeline towards a balanced budget. Okay, if we were to go on what we have done so far, we've been in a negative $7 billion or thereabout for the last 3 years. If we were to run that for another 5 years, that's a $35 billion debt burden that we are taking on in the space of 5 years. Clearly, there's an issue there, because if you're talking with an economy with a GDP of around 140 billion, then even if you grow at 2%, then 35 billion on top of that is going to be a significant chunk. But what we really should be targeting is we should have a roadmap that is going to take us to economic growth of, say, in the region of 5% over the next 3 years.
Because they've listed a figure of 1.3%, and while we're looking at these conservative figures, is it not about time that we look to say that we can be well, okay, let me not call Haiti, because Haiti is starting from zero, so obviously they will have a level of growth. But can we not achieve greater lengths if we properly align? Right.
So the bigger issue is what should be the level of economic growth that we should be targeting. 1.2%. I mean, I would have lost how you arrive at such a specific number of 1.2 or 1.3. I don't know if it's a typo. It's supposed to be 2%, right? But what is the level that we should be targeting for an economy of our size to achieve the objectives that we say we want to achieve with the size of population and everything else? We should be targeting a minimum of 5%. I mean, you use the United States as an example, and I'm not saying that we can achieve that in this year, but that should really what the target should be. Use the United States as an example. That's a much larger economy. They're growing at 2%. But if you have one policy mistake, you end up with a recession. And that's the problem with a 1%, 2% economy. That if there is a policy mistake, we are an island nation. If there's an exogenous shock, you are back into recession again. You need that type of buffer zone. 5% is really where we should be targeting.
Can we actually even achieve the one? We're coming out of a period of 3 consecutive periods of points of negative growth. Some can say that it's better to be conservative than to reach too far.
Of course. I mean, you know, you under-promise and you over-deliver.
Right. And classic case.
Right. And, I mean, yes, you have to take everything into consideration that we have come out of a period of negative growth. Prior to that, you had a global economic set of turmoil. Prior to that, you had a significant, and I mean this is really an untold story that should be highlighted more. You had significant underinvestment in the energy sector between 2005, 2006, 2007, at a point in time when you were actually monetizing your natural gas reserves at its peak. So we've come through a number of headwinds. So yes, we are where we are, and you know, you should be thankful to that to some extent. But I mean, we're talking about budgeting and looking forward, and that's where I'm making the point. Looking forward, 5%.
Looking forward, and we're looking at diversification. The diversification agenda has been a much talked about point for the last 50 years. But if we have to really look at what we have achieved and where we're going, for successive administrations, Vision 2020, growth sectors, cluster development, growth poles, we've heard all of the fad words. But the extent of success that has actually been achieved in aligning these sectors with the needs of the population and ensuring that there's a cohesive plan. Are we any closer today than we were in 1962? All
right, so when we talk diversification, the first point to make in relation to the diversification, this is a multi-year activity, and I think the minister mentioned that when he spoke. So it is not something that, in fact, it really doesn't form part of a budget discussion. It forms part of your multi-year planning, which this government has a 3-year medium-term plan. You had a Vision 2020 before. The problem is that each successive administration comes in, and then you shift, and you take 2 years to adjust your shift, and you start again, and before you know it, 5 years is up, and then we go through the whole cycle again. And what is missing in all of this? What is missing is, where is the national consensus in terms of where we should be going? Have we ever discussed as a country properly the issue of energy security versus export-led growth? In other words, if we're saying that prices are where they are, reserves are diminishing and so on, should we be looking at how we utilize natural gas locally and over what time span, all right, as opposed to monetizing it now, exporting, and using those dollars for development? That is a discussion that needs to be had. Is agriculture going to be a focus point of our economy?
We've had these consultations, and we've had the Vision 2020, we've had a diversification conference, we've had a number of conferences. Is it not about time that we move away from the talk? Right,
but okay, so the real issue is we've had these consultations, stuff has come out, and then the politics gets in the way. In other words, let me ask you this question, or let me put it to you like this. You ask the questions. Let me put it to you like this. You're talking Vision 2020. You're talking moving towards developed country status. I just made the link between productivity growth and developed country. And then you introduce a number of make-work programs that are not productive in and of itself. And that forms a core of your budget and a core of your policy for 10 years. How do you then suddenly snap a finger and it stops? In other words, the politics gets in the way. There is no doubt that you need intervention and social safety net. How do you approach it in a sustainable way?
This is the third time that the People's Partnership government will be delivering a budget. This is not the previous Minister of Finance was Winston Ducran. From 2010 till now, has the partnership made any progress?
Yes, clearly. I mean, the issues, you came into an environment where, I mean, just use something that is tangible that everybody can hold on to. In November, December of 2008, you were able to get a 7% interest rate in Trinidad and Tobago. Today, that is sub-zero, sub-1, right? Trending towards zero. In other words, the economy fell off a cliff, both internationally and locally. You had the CLICO fiasco to deal with. You're talking of $24 billion figure. I think that is what has been bandied about in relation to the total CLICO issue. What is the high size of our Heritage and Stabilization Fund? It's around the same thing.
Right.
We have accumulated a HSF over 10 years or more. We've had to deal with this within the last 3 years. So clearly there were significant headwinds that they had to overcome. So yes, progress has been made. Has it been made at the pace that we would have liked? Probably not.
But progress, and also I want to talk about the social indicators and what we measure GDP as. Can we say that this progress has been equally distributed, that there's equity in our society, that the leakages continue to benefit not a selected few, that the rich remain rich while the poor, the gap gets smaller?
Right. So the issue there is in terms of achieving the level of balance that you need. And also you have to recognize what was the starting point. That those issues that you just raised have been so and have been inculcated. Let me use the example of inflation.
Right.
If you have inflation that is affecting, let's just say it's 10%, and that 10% is affecting everybody in the same way, then okay, fine. But what has happened, it has impacted on salaried workers more than it has impacted on, say, somebody who has a business and is able to pass on costs, right, and is able to invest in real estate, and therefore when inflation takes root, their property prices are going to go up, and therefore that provides some level of insulation. So the point is, we have had instances in this country where inflation has been at 7, 8, 9, 10, 15%, and the inflation rate has been higher than the rate that somebody can, rate of return that someone can get on their savings for 12 years. That has taken away from people's wealth materially.
Well, it's funny, the Prime Minister announced that this year the budget is titled the People's Budget. Right. What can we expect to see in a budget called the People's Budget?
Well, I think, you know, we use these
politically suave
terms, exactly.
Sexy terms.
And you know, Vision 2020, we have, you know, parts of growth and all of these things. At the end of the day, I made it in the comment in my last column on Thursday. What this country needs right now is an understanding that in order to move forward, you have to have shared responsibility and shared sacrifice. All right, the fancy advertising brochure of People's Budget, like I said, what does that actually mean? Because at the end of the day, there will always be a sector that will say, look, I did not get enough, and there will be those that have gotten maybe more than they should.
Do you think that we really do the analysis? And I would like to bring it back down to data-driven decisions.
Sure.
Do we simply sit willy-nilly and think, okay, well, security remains a concern, crime remains a major concern of this country. I am then going to pump the bulk of my money into national security. Who's really measuring the successes, and where is the accountability starting and where is it ending?
Well, that is one of the things I would like to see from this new Minister of Finance. This is his first budget, and as I've stated previously, his first port of call should really be indicating what has transpired in relation to the last budget. And I'm not speaking about whether you have spent what has been allocated to you. It's exactly as you just described it. There must be certain benchmarks in terms of determining criteria for success and deliverability of goods and services, and how we have measured against that. And I think if we get that type of accountability, which we have not had previously, I think that will be a good start.
Yeah, we just have about a minute again until we wrap this interview. Your closing comments to Trinidad and Tobago. A man from the finance sector is actually now heading the Ministry of National Security. He will deliver his first budget. Obviously, those who are in the sectors, obviously, they're all looking on with bated breath to hear what comes out. What are you hoping to hear?
Like I said, I would really like to see the minister be removed a bit. I know it is difficult to be totally removed from, but removed a bit from the politics to really let finance and economics trump politics. That the issue for us in Trinidad and Tobago is understanding that everybody has a role to play, and like I said, shared responsibility, shared sacrifice. There can be no success without some measure of pain. You just need to look at how Canada configured their economy in the 1990s. The German economy is very resilient now. They took their pain a few years ago. We need to do what we need to do and move away from the politics.
We need to do what we need to do. Minister of Finance Larry Howard, the man who's at the helm of the Ministry of Finance, will be delivering his first budget at 1:30. We here at CNC3 will continue to monitor all that's happening. We'll now take a very short break. Michael Anistad will be joining us on set, and then we'll have Fulani Matota and also Hazel Brown. Their thoughts on the people's budget. Stay with us.